So in Section 3 of Unit 2, our focus is going to be on chemical bonds, and we're going to be focusing specifically on ionic compounds. Now, we've already alluded to earlier that a chemical bond is an interaction between atoms, and what happens when they make a chemical bond, it has to do with electrons. Now, you should be looking at your green sheets to Section 3 right now. You'll see this is the first section in this. And so when we have a chemical bond, as it says here, it is due to a sharing or exchanging of electrons. It is all about electrons. We're going to be focusing on ionic bonding, which is where you have an exchange of electrons. That means somebody's going to be losing an electron and somebody's going to be gaining an electron, and as a result, we're going to have that ionic bond that is formed. So because someone has lost an electron, they are going to have a positive charge. And because somebody else has gained an electron, they are going to have a negative charge. And we've all heard the saying that opposites attract. And so it's the attraction of those opposite charges, the positive and the negative, that make them come together to form the ionic compound. So an ion is an important word when we talk about ionic compounds, and the definition of an ion is it is a charged atom. In other words, it is an atom that has a charge, and it has gotten this charge either by gaining or by losing electrons. So we have cations, which are simply ions that have a positive charge, and the way they got a positive charge was they lost electrons. Remember, electrons are negative, so if you lose negatives, you become more positive. And anions are ions that have a negative charge. And again, remember, the way they get this is by gaining electrons. If you gain negatives, you are going to have a negative charge. Now, another term you'll need to know for this activity is polyatomic. And polyatomic, we see our prefix poly, which means many, and atomic, of course, atom is there, so it means many atoms. So a polyatomic ion is simply an ion that consists of many atoms, and together it acts like a single ion that has a charge. For example, if you look on your common ion sheet that you have, on the negative, on the anion side, you see there's a lot of polyatomic ions. We have things like the OH, which together has a negative 1 charge, the NH4, ammonium, which together has a positive 1 charge, the nitrate, the NO3, which altogether has a negative 1 charge. And so what we're going to be doing is putting these positive and negative ions together to make a compound. And the rule is whenever you put these things together to make a compound, the compound that you make has to overall add up to 0. So if your total positive is positive 2, the total negative has to be negative 2, so that altogether it adds up to 0. That's the main rule when we do these. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your pieces that you cut out. You've cut out all of these ions. You notice some of them had positive charges, some of them had negative charges. And what you're going to do is going to use these pieces to build a bunch of ions. So the materials that you are going to need to do this activity are your puzzle ion pieces that you've already cut out in your envelope. You're going to need your blue journal. Turn to page 9. That's the list of compounds we're going to be building. You should have received an Applied Chem Common Ion sheet, which has cations listed on one side and anions listed on the other side. You get to use that as a reference when you're doing tests and quizzes and things as well. You'll also need one large piece of construction paper, a glue stick, and some kind of a pencil or a marker. So what you're going to do is you're going to be building 10 ionic compounds using your puzzle pieces. And on your blue journal on page 9 is the list of the 10 compounds that you're going to build. And you're going to put them together like little puzzles, and then ultimately you're going to glue them on your construction paper when we're done. So at the end of the period, you should have all 10 compounds built and glued onto your construction paper. So we're going to work through one example together as you're watching this video, and that'll show you how to do it, and then you can do the rest and get your construction paper all put together. So we're going to work through I think it's the second example on your sheet, sodium sulfate, and it's combined by making the sodium ion combined with the sulfate ion. So the way you're going to do this is you're going to look at page 9, and here's an example of what page 9 should look like in your ion sheet, and you see the first one at the top there is we want to make a compound that has sodium and sulfate ions combined together. So the first thing we need to do is figure out, well, what is the sodium ion? So you look at your common ion sheet, look on the cation, the positive side, and you want to find sodium and see, well, what is the symbol for this sodium ion? So here's what your ion sheet looks like. So in this case, we're looking, and you're trying to find the sodium, and there it is. There's the sodium, and so we can see sodium is Na+1. So you want to look through your puzzle pieces, and you want to find the puzzle piece that has that symbol on it. Okay, there's my Na+1 piece. And then the other ion is sulfate, and so again, we want to look at that ion sheet. We want to flip it over to the anion side and find sulfate. And when we do, we see that sulfate is SO4 and it has a -2 charge. So we want to find that puzzle piece that has the sulfate on it. So we get our two puzzle pieces, and we're going to put our puzzle pieces together. So there we go. What do you think? Does that look like we're finished yet? Well, no, that looks like an incomplete puzzle. So we are not done. One of each piece does not do the job. In fact, we said that the charges have to add up to 0, and if we look at this, we've got sodium who's +1, but our sulfate is -2. And so +1 and -2, well, that doesn't add up to 0. And so we need to put this together so that it always adds up to 0. Now, you may use as many of each ion as you want. So we can use as many sodium pieces as we need, and we can use as many sulfate pieces as we need. But we have to keep going until the whole thing adds up to 0, until the puzzle is complete. So in this case, as you can imagine, what we need to do is we need to dig through our envelope and find another sodium piece and then put another sodium piece. Now, when we look at the charges, we can see that we have a grand total of +2 for the charges. And of course, with our one sulfate, that is -2. And so that adds up to 0. So now we have built this. So this is what our puzzle piece for sodium sulfate would look like. We'll put this together, and what you want to do is go down your list and put all 10 of those compounds that are listed on your sheet together. Now, once you have that, you're going to glue these on your paper, and when you glue these on your paper, I want you to leave about 1 inch underneath each compound, and because you're going to write 2 lines, and the first line you're going to write the words for the compound. In this case, our positive ion is the Na+1, and on our ion sheet we can see that's called sodium, and our negative ion, SO4 -2, that was called sulfate. So we're just going to write the name of that compound, which is simply the name of the 2 ions, sodium sulfate. You're going to go ahead and write that on your construction paper underneath your pieces. And I also want you to leave some space, because later on we're going to show you how to write the formula, and we're going to go there and write the formula underneath. So when you lay your 10 compounds out on your big piece of construction paper, make sure you leave at least 1 inch below each compound for you to write the 2 lines. And you can go ahead today and write the word name. You're just writing the 2 words of the 2 ions, like sodium sulfate. You're writing that below each piece, and then we'll show you how to do the formula part later. So that's what it should look like. That's our goal. You can now go ahead and get all those materials out. Turn to page 9 of your blue journal and make all 10 of those compounds. Glue them on the construction paper. Make sure you put your name on the construction paper, and we'll set it aside to dry. And we'll come back and take a look at those tomorrow. Have fun.